It was a betrayal of trust. Unfortunately, for many thousands of years, in one way or another, people have hated the Jewish people. Jews in America have lived in basically a golden age, probably stretching from the late 40s post-Holocaust to probably more recently, maybe about a decade ago. But the hatred of Jewish people has not gone away. I've always promised myself that this would always be something that I would advocate for. I was raised in a very Jewish household. I went to a Jewish parochial school from kindergarten through 8th grade. My parents were both very involved in the Jewish community. My mother worked for a synagogue. My father's father, Irving Zarin, his family was killed in a pogrom in Russia. So in Tsarist Russia, pre-Nazi Germany, and like most of Eastern Europe, Jews were placed in very small areas where they were able to live, called shtetls. My grandfather's family lived in a small shtetl in a town called Petrikov. And one day, fortunately, while my grandfather happened to be out on an errand, the Cossacks came and they murdered his family, like they did to many Jews in what they call a pogrom. His sisters were hidden in a laundry basket. He discovered this when he came back. I think he was 14 at the time. Those experiences, much like many people in my generation and my parents' generation who experienced family members who had survived or not survived the Holocaust, that left an indelible impression on many of us. Being Jewish is more than following a religion. It's a culture. There's a sense of peoplehood. I ran 4 times. So the first time I ran, I was a non-incumbent. I came in 4th. The second, third, and 4th time that I ran as city councilor at large, I came in 1st every time.
Owen has been a sole voice that really understands what it's like when you're Jewish in this community.
I think I promised myself in that role that I was always going to be visibly and proudly Jewish. We had unanimously passed this resolution, and I brought it to a then member of the school committee, and they said, "Oh, sure, I'll put this on the agenda and we'll discuss it and we'll figure out how we can support you." Well, the next thing I know, I got an email from the interim superintendent stating that they were taking it off the agenda, that only the superintendent or the chair of the committee can add items to the agenda, and that we have to be thoughtful of all students and we can't give any sort of special treatment to Jewish students. That was kind of my first warning that there might be some issues with how willing our schools were to actually engage on the issue. Saying that hate speech was discovered in the high school. It was very suspiciously vague, and for whatever reason really raised some red flags for me. I tried reaching out to a few people to try to understand more about it. No one would tell me anything. I reached out to law enforcement to ask them if they were aware of this, and they said the school had not contacted them. I reached out to the principal who had sent out the email, who in the email stated, if you have questions, I can meet with you privately, which also, again, was very suspicious to me because in the majority of communications from the schools historically, if a hate issue had happened, they would at least identify the nature of it. So in early January of 2025, I was able to gain a appointment with the high school principal. And this is after now a few months of trying to have conversations with our school district and committee about this topic of anti-Semitism and how we can best address it as a city, and basically getting blown off. So the principal sat down with me, and I didn't know what to expect, and sat down with me and said, well, so there were two incidents that occurred. One was a swastika that was carved into a desk. We tried sanding down the desk. That made it actually more conspicuous. And so we took the desk away altogether. And then a week later, there was a notebook that was found in a classroom that said, "I hate Jews," written in it. Now, the other thing that was interesting about this too, and that is that he told me that the police were notified, but they didn't seem to be overly concerned. Prior to our meeting, knowing that law enforcement had not been contacted, I suggested to the principal that I'd be very curious to know what law enforcement had to say. Guess who we called next? The Easthampton Police Department. He told me this and told me that I had to keep the secret, that I couldn't tell anybody else about it, and that this had to just stay between him and me. That made me feel incredibly uncomfortable. Right around this time, I started to get calls from parents about incidents in the schools. There was a swastika drawn on a poster, and supposedly the administrator, when it was brought to her attention, said, "What do you want me to do about it?" There was kind of this real effort not to talk about it all. Like, maybe if we just ignore it, we'll go away. Another swastika was found in the school thereafter. And then I started to have conversations with a couple of parents who were having negative experiences with their children in the school. One middle schooler who had participated in a class assignment to basically talk about their cultural background and proudly talked about how he was Jewish, wore a Jewish star that he proudly displayed. His classmates, on hearing this, started following him around, showing him Nazi salutes, saying things like, "Here comes the Jew," and teasing him for being Jewish. The response of the schools was completely unsatisfactory, and the parent withdrew the student from the school and has been homeschooling them, and has told me that they will not return to public school ever again because of that experience. There was another student in a higher grade that was also being targeted for their Jewish identity. They had spent some time in Israel. They had a shirt with Hebrew lettering on it, and another student started following them around and basically taunting them and saying things to them based on their Jewish identity, calling them a colonizer and accusing them of genocide because of their perceived events of what was transpiring in the Middle East at the time. They publicly tried to essentially criminalize my concern for a civil rights issue. The school committee chair enlisted the help of the local Democratic committee, who I don't know why they would be involved with this, but to basically come and just attack me personally. And so instead of saying, well, I think our city should deal with this kind of hate in X, Y, and Z way, they would just say things like, well, I used to be friends with Owen Zarrett, but we just really have a cordial relationship, and he's a bad person, and let me tell you why.
He did not even respond to the meeting request until 2 hours before the meeting this afternoon. And he has to have it rescheduled.
That's a false statement.
Laura told me not to bring it up, but I think it's really important that people understand that he's lying.
There were accusations that essentially suggested that I had somehow undermined the fabric of Easthampton society, that I was some sort of abusive ogre and hated women, and none of it actually touched upon the actual material concerns that I was bringing forward. It was very clearly a vindictive, reactive, retaliatory measure, strictly to try to get attention away from these incidents that were occurring, and that the school committee was on record as not addressing at all.
To ask the city council to censure a Jewish parent for speaking out about anti-Semitism, you would be in violation of the First Amendment, of the Equal Protection Clause, and of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. For the sake of the city of Easthampton, I would strongly, strongly encourage you to decline to censure Mr. Zarrett.
I think in a rational environment, I would have definitely sat down and fought it. There was no way of having a rational discussion in an irrational environment. And these people were clearly out to harm me. This very clearly smacked as a violation of free speech. I looked around and I said, this is a witch hunt. Now, I guess there's people out there who could claim that I pulled the wool over people's eyes. I'm actually a really bad person who is able to deceive the public and, present this really good side of me that is really engaged, always there for constituents, spend an extra amount of time participating in my role as a city councilor, just because I really wanted to climb the ladder of the city and be able to be in control. That sounds like something similar to what we're talking about. The response was stonewalling. We don't need these things. We have a very vibrant DEI curriculum. I would send out emails sharing statistics about what was happening nationally, with kind of imploring them to recognize these and try to get ahead of the curve. They wouldn't respond. I got one angry email from the school committee chair basically saying that she disagreed with me on my approach and didn't have to meet with me about this. This was all recommendations and suggestions that were all eventually taken up and brought forward by our state commission to combat anti-Semitism.
The Commonwealth has a new commission meant to combat rising incidences of anti-Semitism.
Being a Jewish elected official in Massachusetts who had to leave public office because of the backlash for basically standing up for Jewish students, I was invited to speak at the Massachusetts Special Commission to combat anti-Semitism.
I'm proud to represent my community, but I'm gravely disappointed I've had to pursue this level of exposure in order to demand accountability and bring attention to the Jew hatred that's permeated our schools in Easthampton.
That's not the community that any of us want to live in.
There are so many different instances of your story just now where something could have been done better.
These are moments where when people do things like this, where they conceal these incidents, where they treat them as generic bullying, where they minimize incidents of anti-Semitism, that they can reflect and fix it, or they can dig in. And unfortunately, what I keep seeing in Easthampton is they're digging in and digging in and digging in. Even with our new superintendent, Michelle Balch, I thought, okay, this is a fresh set of eyes, a fresh heart, a fresh mind. She's going to figure out a way to try to fix this. And it's kind of been more of the same. I sat down with Salem Derby, who is now our mayor. We met at Abandoned Building Brewery after all this stuff had become made known to me. And I talked to him about a few things. I talked to him about just the general prevalence that I was aware of this, the concern that just to have conversations around the topic were being avoided. And then this most recent event at the high school where they weren't even disclosing that these things were happening anymore and were concealing them. And he just dismissed the whole thing, told me to leave it alone, told me that the city had other things to worry about, told me that I was making a big deal out of swastikas. From my recollection, he called them peace symbols. The bottom line is he never asked me any questions. He never asked for clarification. He never asked for a timeline. He never offered alternative solutions, because that's what I was going to him for. I wasn't looking for, the only outcome I was looking for was a conversation and concern, and he expressed none of it. One of our school committee members, Sam Hunter, had posted on Facebook that I had lied about these incidents, that I had lied to the press, made a number of personal statements about me, a number of unfounded defamatory statements about me, called me names, suggested that I didn't even belong in the Jewish community and maybe they should reject me as well. There was a DESI investigation. Just to be clear, the nature of the investigations that DESI does is more to look into compliance. So did the school file the appropriate paperwork? And thank God for the Easthampton School District, they did. They documented these incidents, the 2 incidents in the high school, because the other ones were outside of the window that they could investigate. So we don't know how the school addressed those or how that's viewed under the scope of the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. But we know that they did do Title VI. They did a Title VI investigation on these 2 incidents, the swastika and the I Hate Jews writing. But they also said something that was very interesting, was that because of the nature of their investigation, they can't conclude or they can't determine the overall environment, whether there's a hostile environment for Jewish students or not. So I reached out to now Mayor Derby and I said, well, I understand that there was compliance with paperwork here, but there's broader concerns here about incidents that occurred outside the window of investigation that we couldn't evaluate, as well as the overall environment for Jewish students. And I think it would make sense, just from an oversight perspective, to recruit an agency that can provide us with appropriate oversight and scrutiny of these incidents. In this case, it would probably be the Civil Rights Division of the Attorney General's office, but potentially there could be some other third party, either a state department or, some other kind of neutral third party. And he said no, that he was satisfied with the conclusion and that we didn't have to do anything more about it. And we now know, because there was an investigation from the Department of Education, as I indicated, that brought to light a few of these incidents, not all of them, but formally, they recognized that the ones I had sent in my complaint, but formally we know that these happened. And so now we have members of the government actively trying to suppress the truth. And ironically, in the process of calling me a liar, actually revealing themselves to be dishonest and misleading to the public. I want Easthampton to visibly support the Jewish community. I want them to be transparent and accountable. I think that all forms of hate should be clearly rejected by municipalities. And that in this case, we have a form of hate that has been well documented across the country, as well as most recently in the Boston Globe as the highest kind of form of hate crime occurring currently in the Commonwealth. Wouldn't it be great if Easthampton said, anti-Semitism occur in our communities, here what we're going to do to address it? Here is our statement of support for the Jewish community. Here are some statistics around anti-Semitism. This type of thing shouldn't happen here, but when it does, here's how we are going to identify it and provide a clear response. I've lost quite a bit because of this. I stuck my neck out and became the target of a huge smear campaign, which continues to go on. There's many Owen Zarets in the world. There's municipal representatives and municipal, just private people across the country that I talk to on a daily basis from this network that I've been able to form now, fellow advocates who have experienced the exact same thing. They go to their city, they complain about anti-Semitism, they get blacklisted, they get marginalized, and they get villainized. We'll see. I mean, it's really up to them. I can only control myself, and I'm doing everything every day to figure out how to try to make myself the best person in this situation and learn from the examples of what I don't want to be. And I'm hoping that Easthampton will do the same. Just asking for some transparency and accountability. Just say that these things happened and what you're going to do with it, and be honest. You don't even have to talk about me. You don't have to say you don't have to comment on the events that took place in me. I don't care about me. I care about my city, and I care about the Jewish kids in our schools, and I care about the community that deserves honesty and accountability and bravery from our elected officials. There's 15 million of us, and we need the many tens of millions more around the world of people who aren't Jewish to ally with us and to help us counter and push back the tide on the world's oldest form of hate, which is surging like wildfire right now.